that last session was all about what you do when you get the customers. How do you keep them engaged? How do you engender more loyalty? Finding those new customers as has been some of the topic for just about every conversation since we started yesterday morning is really under pressure from rising customer acquisition costs. That is a big part of that due to all of these new privacy restrictions from Apple and Facebook and so on. And it's causing marketers to think much more creatively about their portfolios and how they are targeting their digital advertising. So that's what we're going to be talking about on this session, adapting advertising for a new era of data privacy. I'd like to introduce our speakers to come on up to the session. We have Ian Young. He's VP of Growth at Parachute Home. Sunil Kaki, EVP of Marketing at Beachbody. Sarah Henry, she is VP, Head of Content, Influencer and Commerce at Walmart. Adrien Menard, co-founder and CEO of Botify. And we have Matt Gehring, Chief Marketing Officer at Dutch, who's going to moderate the conversation. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Glad to be here. Lots of familiar faces, and good to see everybody, and not just the Zoom window. But yeah, Scott, thanks for introducing us. And I think where we're looking at it, and what we kind of want to talk through today is obviously all the iOS 14 changes. You've got Chrome, Google changes next year, and there's a lot of. I think somebody yesterday from ListTrack was talking about steroid baseball, and now we're dealing without that. So with the data privacy issues, with the lack of sort of signal that we get because of those changes, how are we adopting our marketing mix? How are we changing our tactics to adapt both expectations up to the board and exec team, our results, as well as just finding new channels, finding new ways to kind of reach the consumer. So maybe to start out, I'll go down, start with you, Ian, on the end, and first kind of hit off on how have you seen your marketing mix evolve this year, and kind of how you're thinking through performance?
Yeah, for sure. So our channel mix has actually been more or less consistent. It's just how we use the tactics within those channels have definitely shifted. So before bottom funnel conversion stuff in like Facebook and paid social specifically, obviously that got deprecated. So we're doing more top of funnel stuff. But as an aggregate whole, our mix is actually pretty similar.
Sunil?
Yeah, Sunil, most recently at Beachbody. Similar, so a lot of the obvious sort of things, diversifying away from Meta, and we were 60% on Meta-related sort of properties in terms of ad spend. We kind of had to lower our budget and also move away from Facebook and Instagram. And really, it's forcing us to be more disciplined about customer engagement, conversion funnels, our email program, CRM, like all the things that are just candidly good hygiene that we're just now forced to go focus on. And that's been a big focus. An attribution model, upper funnel, offline channels, there's so much to do. It's just that the easy stuff is what we were focusing on before, and now it's just going back to good hygiene.
Okay.
So, Adrien, CEO from Botify, an organic search marketing platform. So what has changed in the past quarters, I think, is really the fact that many of our clients asked us about how they should revisit their marketing programs with exactly the few things that you shared with us. And what we realized is that most of our clients are investing more in organic marketing, not only organic search marketing, but really searching for more sustainable long-term profitability. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing, and I think it's going to accelerate with the ad tracking changes that you mentioned.
Oh, Sarah?
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Nice to see everybody in person, by the way, and not on a video screen. This is great. Certainly we're also navigating, like everyone, all of the privacy changes that have gone into effect over the past months and years. I'd say for us, our marketing mix is really focused on essentially looking at how customer behavior is shifting and really reaching customers where they are. I'd say customer journey isn't linear anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. And we tend to go to where customers are spending their time. And that can be everything from them scrolling through their news feeds, binge watching videos on TikTok. It can be where they're spending time with their favorite creators. And really, we're sort of looking at it in two ways, which is how do we reach customers when they're raising their hand that they've got intent around something, whether that's refreshing their outfit or a wardrobe or an outdoor space or their weekly grocery list. And then the other way we're really looking at it is how are we creating those moments of product discovery at that point of content consumption. And so it's really not just waiting for somebody to raise their hand, but how are we creating those moments of impulse and really product discovery through the eyes of creators and authentic voices.
Great. Connecting with the consumer has always been really key, and we've seen advocacy be important. That's come through a lot with podcasts, but it's also we're seeing that rise of influencer creators. I know it's a big part of what you guys are doing. Can you talk a little bit more on how you've seen that change in terms of the use of influencers, what's working well, and kind of building out that arm for you all?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Influencers have been around for a minute, right? Like, not a new channel. I think for us, the way we think about them has really evolved significantly over the past few years. I think we've all seen those ads that cause a little bit of an eye roll, where somebody's holding up whatever it is in the post, and it's hashtag ad, and it's very clear that it's a brand deal, and it's really prescriptive, and those can be very effective. And we do some of that as well. But I would say, beyond sort of the point in time campaign, the thing that we've really been focused on is how are you really leveraging creators and influencers in an organic way? And so we have this portfolio of tens of thousands of influencers and creators. And they're less like the upper echelon mega influencers with hundreds of millions of fans. They're more like your next door neighbor. They're more like those figures that are maybe the heads of their online social community groups, things like that. But it's really niche micro influencers on up to the mega. And really, it's less about using them for a specific campaign or prescriptive message, and really having them, giving them tools to work sort of Walmart products and services organically into their daily vernacular where it makes sense. So this is less Kim Kardashian. This is more like relatable mom trying to get dinner on the table. And if you're anything like me, trying to get their toddler to eat something other than chicken nuggets, and it's her talking about how Walmart is helping her to do that and maybe saving time through something like online delivery. And so for us, that's quite effective, and it's something that, because of the nature that it's affiliate-based, it's something that works for us as a performance channel in mass, but then it's also driving consideration and really perception shift in key categories.
Okay. Sunil, what about you? I think you've...
Yeah, it's similar to a large extent, right? Like the easy sort of swipe up and pay for play is kind of gone, or it's not as efficient and all of that stuff. So really the authentic sort of storytelling, and it's one of the 7 touch points, right? And it's a very good one because someone else is telling your story, or the product story, or the brand story, rather than you saying it in an ad that you made. And we've been able to leverage, similarly, we have a sort of core friendly influencers that will tell our story in different ways because it's just part of their lives, right? It's not something that's just an ad or a post. And that's been really helpful. And then repurposing that on paid ads, right? Instead of our in-house creative team coming up with different ways to tell our story, leveraging what influencers do best, which is tell stories in our paid ads through ad access or paid sponsorship, or even just getting the content. So we're thinking broader than just pay for post, and thinking about how we leverage the content that they're creating in all aspects. Even putting it on our landing pages and our emails and things like that. Like, they're just telling your story in a much better way in some ways, and it's more authentic. So using it everywhere and structuring the deals with the creators in the same way, that it's more of a content deal and a post deal, and it's a more multifaceted deal rather than just pay for post or ad access or whatever. So I think just thinking about it more holistically.
Yeah. So similarly, like the authenticity and the content quality are like the key drivers. Like it's less about trying to get like tens of millions of followers or of like some macro, really large influencer. You can sort of compensate for that by sponsoring and posting and boosting it. So you're optimizing for the authenticity and the content itself, and then you can use your paid marketing to get the reach and then amplify that.
Yeah.
And then leveraging that also helps with the deals with these aspiring influencers, because you're putting your money to help grow their viewership and followership.
And the other thing that we went even a step further, we actually started creating original content on our platform on Beachbody, workout content with influencers, right? So it gives them it's a lot more authentic when they're promoting their own content on the platform. So really bringing them into the product and the experience as much as possible, and not being afraid to sort of talk about bigger, more sort of involved deals, I think is a good lesson.
Okay. When you think about efficiency and you think about how people are shifting their spend, a lot of the conversations is usually around just typical paid channels. And I know, Adrien, you work with a lot of big brands on the SEO front, and I've heard more and more people feeling like that's a big part of their focus. And how are you kind of seeing that shift? How are you seeing like the importance of SEO, and even how you think about measuring and testing, optimizing it, which I would say even just a few years ago you didn't think about it was very long. It's going to take months, years to see an impact.
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that most digital marketers agree that SEO is a key pillar of the traffic and the revenue of a retail company. But most of the time, they are facing difficulties in the implementations of the solutions and in the measurement of the performance of the channel. But I think it's changing dramatically, and it's changing very quickly, because there is a new wave of SEO platforms that are bringing machine learning capabilities, automation capabilities that enable the teams to implement the solutions faster and to measure the performance of organic search much more efficiently than in the past. So yes, it's changing, while it's super interesting to notice that it remains a major impactful channel for the digital marketing teams.
Sunil, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's realigning like your existing editorial resources, content, copy, like all of those resources, and giving like SEO related KPIs to go shoot for, and giving them the right resources around vendors and metrics and dashboards and analytics to help them do their job and measure the impact that they're having to the overall business has been a big focus for us as well. And that's how we've been able to double down on SEO. SEO has always been important, but like just shifting the resources more like, all right, you're an SEO team rather than like a standalone copy content writing sort of a team. I think that's been really helpful for us to drive real impact.
Yeah.
I think to steal a point that you mentioned about good hygiene, right? Like SEO is not a new thing, right? Like this is something that we should have been doing forever, like always. And so like this is a good opportunity to just refresh that hygiene, do the best practices. And a lot of the best practices feed into good partnerships, right? Like you're reaching out to publishers and like to supplement your domain authority and link building strategies. And some of those conversations can lead to broader partnership opportunities that may not have happened if you didn't have that focus and someone with like brain power like thinking about it.
So as you guys have been seeing your marketing mix shift and things are changing, can you kind of share with the group any insights you've had on managing expectations with the board, with the exec team, on just what to expect, how to kind of think through measurement differently, how to give things more time? Sarah, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really striking the balance between driving our business objectives, our enterprise objectives, and really doing that through, call it well-established channels that are a little bit farther in their maturity curve. And that's, a blend for us of earned, owned, paid, approach. We also like to balance that, and I'd say, from our leadership, there's a continued support for not just looking at where customer behavior is today, but where it's shifting tomorrow, and how are we to some extent helping to shape that, and really shaping it not just for the sake of shaping it, but shaping it to create value that either puts time back in customers' day, that solves a problem for them, or gives them an experience that we know they're going to love. And so to that end, we, sort of carve out essentially like an innovation bucket that is focused on testing new channels, new media, new partnerships, and things like that. And really the focus there is, not necessarily holding them to the same level of expectation of channels that are more, far along their maturity curve, but really looking at what customer behavior we're driving and what's the forward progress from there.
Yeah, so I mean, the previous panelists talked about like FOP and like that first order profitability. Like it's infrastructure that you have to put in investments to form a relationship with your finance team to be like, okay, these are the levers, this is how big it is, this is how powerful I can pull on it. And in today's environment, you just have less margin of error to be wrong. You just have to be more, I guess, focused on making sure that whatever cash flow or profitability metrics that you need to hit, you adapt and spend in the way that is relevant, right? And if you put in that investment and you have the understanding with the board, with the finance team, and even peers, it becomes clear. It's like, no, we're going to keep on spending here, and actually now there's opportunity because everyone else is pulling back, so you can zig where other people are zagging, and spend more into something where it might be a higher budgets than what was planned, but your revenue is also higher because there's a return. And so if you can sort of navigate that conversation, both up to finance and board, but also to like lateral and to direct reports and marketing managers, like one of the things that we do is we tell our teams, hey, if there's something that is clearly profitable, we know that it's incremental, we know that if we spend $1 here, we're going to get 4 or 5, whatever back in the bottom line, do more. Like forget about whatever planned budget we had. We can figure that out with the finance team. We can justify it. Just focus on actually doing the job, the work of getting efficient spend, making sure that you're reaching the right customer and convincing them to do what you want to do, which is buy more and more of your product. So it's all about that, having that foundational infrastructure in place so that the subsequent conversations become easier and having that trust buy-in, because if you don't have trust, you're going to get hammered.
So, yeah, maybe I can share my perspective with major retailers. What is clear is that our customers are asking for more visibility on the profitability of the channel. So I think they are under the impression that they can do much more, but so they are challenging us in the forecast and in the impact that the SEO optimizations can have. And now that I think it's good because it means that it's really pushing everyone into the same directions. And as SEO is definitely one of the most profitable channels, it makes sense. So and that's definitely the future of, I think, any marketing channels to be able to prove the impact that you can have on the revenue or the marketing mix. Because of course we are impacting in some ways not only SEO but every channel, the clicks on content, the profitability of every other strategy that you can lead. So, but that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of reiterate Ian's point, right? Like the communication to your CFO, to senior leadership, that's not in the weeds day to day. You know, everyone, like last year, for example, everyone heard about iOS changes and everything else, but didn't quite understand the nuances of what that meant or how immediate the impact could be. I think prioritizing communication across the board with your CFO, senior leadership board, your team, your peers, because once sort of numbers start going south, fear, anxiety starts to creep up across the organization, right? So if you're the person that's saying, like, we know these changes are happening, this is what to expect over the next 3 months, 6 months, this is our plan, even if you don't know exactly 100% of what's going to happen, just the fact that you have a plan actually goes a long way. And that's been a really helpful sort of part of the process. And again, none of us really can predict exactly what's going to happen, but just the fact that you have a plan, you're able to communicate and be consistent and deliver on interim goals that you set for your team, then the trust sort of builds up internally. You get a little bit more leeway. You're not doing drastic sort of changes across the org in terms of budget or people or resources. I think that's just good, again, good hygiene.
Yeah. So some of that kind of that playing into expectations relates a little bit to testing. So, and channel testing. So like, how have you guys worked at, is it a portion of your budget? How do you kind of, especially working with your CFO on discovery? You can't really adjust your marketing mix if something like Meta is no longer as efficient or CPMs get too expensive. You've got to find where's that next opportunity to connect with that customer. So how have you also sort of seen that testing new channels, sort of working with some of those new ones and kind of building them up so they can become one of your core channels?
Yeah, so like similarly, like again, you should always be testing. Like I think if you don't, you're going to be stagnant and like you're going to fall behind the curve. It's just a matter of like how quickly can you in parallel process number of tests and what's your margin of error, right? You just have to have a lot more conviction. It's not like maybe moonshot, shot in the dark thing. You kind of have to have a hypothesis that this is a high likelihood of working out in your favor, and in aligning that expectation with all your stakeholders, finance, senior leadership, whatnot, so that, okay, maybe in the past we may have put in four bets or 5 bets down on the whatever roulette table. Maybe you only put down 1 or 2, and it's like a more high probability of hitting it. So if, knock on wood, it doesn't work, you're not going to be screwed for that period of time.
Yeah, I think that's sort of important for you to have budgets for testing and maybe not crazy moonshot things, but always, right? Regardless of how the media is performing, how the business is performing, always. So it's an interesting one because you want to define what those parameters are for your team. You might not want to convey that externally, meaning to your CFOs, because that's the first one to go, right? When the numbers go south, it's like, oh, get rid of your testing budget. That's 15% savings or 10% savings or 20%. It doesn't work that way, right? You got to find the next thing. You got to test creative. You got to test live message. Like that's always ongoing, just part of your mix. So it's a fine balance of having a budget, but not sort of, it's carving it out so definitively that your CFO can say, oh, get rid of that. We won't change it. We won't see any change in the business. So it's a fine balance of discipline, but also have it be part of the mix so it just can't like disappear overnight.
I think it also has to do with the success criteria of what you're trying to drive. I think, and how you're, sort of socializing that to leadership teams across the enterprise. I think, for something like, let's take live shopping, right? And really like live shopping, like the ability to buy in platform without having to leave that platform. Like that's been pretty new to the US, right? It's maybe 1.5 years old or so. And so for something like that, I think, for all of us, like it's really hard to think about something like that where customer behavior is new and like it's new for the enterprise, it's new the way you're testing it. Like probably that's not as far along in its maturity curve and what it's going to drive as something like paid search or even the efficacy of SEO or something like that. And so I think it is really thinking through with your teams, like what are the KPIs we're going to measure and what are those things that we're actually going to almost establish as a baseline. Like it's not about driving success the first round. It's about understanding what is the customer behavior across the shopper journey. And then I think it's also sort of setting expectation with leadership around the fact that it's not about, maybe driving enormous success with the first test. It's actually about forward progress against the KPIs that you identify are actually the things that are moving the needle and showing that customer behavior is shifting.
Yeah.
So in the SEO, things are changing quickly, as I mentioned. So the innovative SEO automation capabilities finally make it possible to test. So we have more and more proof of concept with those solutions. And yes, there is an equation to solve about the revenue impact that you can have. So I think it's totally normal to do it. So as a vendor, we have to follow that, and we fully support this kind of request from the clients.
So one of the other things that we talked about when we last week was just around marketing mix. A lot of times people just think about channel. It's Meta, it's Google, it's TikTok, whatever that may be, but it's also sort of where within the funnel that you're spending. So brands become a little bit more important, I think. There's more of a focus on that, and it's another challenge kind of working with finance on the measurement of brand and measurement of sort of the different stages of the funnel. So with your shifts that you guys have been seeing the last year, how has it affected kind of where in the funnel you're spending as well as how you look at brand?
Yeah, so I mean, going back to the first point in terms of like our channel mix hasn't changed that much, but the tactics within it has changed dramatically. Like bottom funnel, the ability of Facebook just like, here's a check and go find me that person that's gonna buy like a week later, like that's gone. Like I don't think that's coming back. And so you're basically just going back to like marketing in the 80s where you actually have to think about the full journey and make investments in the appropriate places with the 7 touches and make sure that you have that sort of just best practice hygiene of what everyone should have been doing all this time and we've gotten lazy. In terms of like the measurement and then like the expectations with the CFO piece, it should all eventually, if it is truly effective, investing in top of funnel will get to the bottom of funnel eventually. It's just a matter of how you measure it, and unfortunately that's gotten harder, right? So the running geolift tests and stuff like that, like it's expensive. It's not something that smaller brands can unfortunately have the budgets or volume to get to significance. And so that's obviously been a challenge, but if you are fortunate enough to have scale enough to be able to measure these things, investments in top of funnel and brand, it is possible to show like the CFO here is the actual return on ad spend for a top of funnel brand campaign that's basically untargeted. It's just obviously a hard challenge, but something that is possible.
Yeah, I mean it's an ongoing balance, right? It's always, and again, similarly, you don't have like 20% of your budget that's brand spend anymore. It's like every impression is brand response. So just understanding that and making sure that you're aware of it and you're always sort of striking the right balance. And then also there are macro things like, what does a business need? Does a CAC have to go lower? Does, like, all the things that are happening in the business as well that you have to sort of strike the right balance. So you're sort of always sort of balancing in, and also seasonality. If you're going into a big seasonal part of your business, then you probably want to raise brand awareness leading up to it. So there's so many things that go into it. So it's not a static percentage allocation or anything. It's more of a balance that you're sort of calibrating all through the year. So
I also don't think they're mutually exclusive anymore. Yeah. I mean, I think there are tactics and channels out there that are doing a lot of different jobs. I mentioned earlier, we think about creators and influencers not just as a performance driver that's driving meaningful, sort of sales and and product uptake, but also as really doing the hard work of building brand equity for our brand, as well as the products that we're promoting through that channel, and then also perception and sentiment shift and even consideration. So it's a little bit of a one-stop shop where we get a lot of goodness out of one thing. I also think one of the things that we've been focusing on as of late is really how do we think about maybe channels that traditionally would have been thought as brand builders, and how do we almost like bring an element of shoppability that almost provides value and sort of helps them to sort of again, sort of like fulfill multiple jobs across the funnel. One of the examples that we've seen a lot of success with is in what we call sort of the grocery commerce space, which is at 4:30 today, we all start thinking about the same thing, which is, what am I going to have for dinner? For some of us, that's going to be around here. For others of us, that's, how do I get, dinner on the table for, not only me, but my family, and how do I navigate dietary preferences and what I have in my fridge, and I got to stretch $1 even farther these days because of gas prices and all of that. And it's a really laborious process. It's like 30 steps long. And so, across meal planning, recipe discovery, getting it on a list, getting it, on your table, et cetera, there's a lot there. And so one of the things we also like to look at is how do you take these traditionally sort of branded mediums and how do you bring shoppability in a way that not only fulfills your business objectives, but also eliminates or shrinks that so that you're actually saving customers time as well. And so, we do this through partnerships. Like we have one that we launched with NBCU last year, and it's all around the Today sort of property, and it's across linear TV, across streaming, across social, et cetera. And it's literally like cooking content where it's traditionally what you would consider a branded channel, and yet we're bringing shoppability so that in just a couple of clicks, the recipes that you're seeing within the screen, are now within your Walmart pickup and delivery cart, ready to make right from there. So, I think, again, they're not mutually exclusive, and I think there is a way to think about what's the way you bring shoppability to sort of shorten that distance between inspiration and purchase.
Yeah. So what I can see about SEO only on what we are seeing with the customers is that I think it's common to say that SEO has been underinvested over the past years. So now things are changing for two reasons: the ad tracking changes that we described, etc., but also because of the automation capabilities. And what we are seeing with the customers is that they are ready to invest between 5 to 10 times more in automation capabilities than in a pure analytics approach. And that's normal. I think there is one good reason. This is the revenue impact that the automation capabilities can bring. So this is changing the industry, I think, for long. And it's good, of course, for the SEO, but also for every marketing initiative that is going to be in the end more profitable because of the impact of search and what we discussed. So.
Great. Well, we got about a minute left. Anybody want to throw out their sort of new channel they're excited about, or tactic, or something that they've been playing around with that they're hoping scales this year, that they're willing to give up? You know?
I don't know. We talked about this in the green room, and I don't know. What you want to go first? I've been going.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is a focus for us. It's not new or anything, but just it is a nuanced thing for you to make it work. So really dedicating the right resources around creative and measurement and ad like media buying and all of it, like just it takes time, and again setting the right expectations externally outside of the marketing org with the CFO that it's a 3 to 6 month investment at least to find any meaningful kind of thing, right? You might find one ad does well a week, doesn't mean we've cracked it, right? It's just being patient with that, I think, is key. And with that, as things change, and this is more broader than a channel, give yourself and your team enough time to recalibrate and figure out a plan, put a very well thought out, what do the next 3 months, 6 months look together? It's very important. It's easy to just get into crisis mode and start doing stuff, which you should, right? You should stop the bleeding, so to speak. But giving yourself and your team the time to be thoughtful, I think, is going to be really important as times are changing so rapidly.
Yeah, this is like a little bit of an unfair answer maybe. I don't know that it's any one new channel to me. I think it's, I love the prospect of creating value by shortening the distance in the shopper journey that gives people time or stress tax or value back. And I also love the idea of sort of doing that through partnerships where teams are coming together to essentially put their unique differentiators across the customer journey together to create new experiences that haven't existed before. I get really excited about the tactics and the media within that, including things like live shopping. I think partnerships where we're bringing an aspect of shoppability to what would be otherwise branded experiences. Those are the things that I think are exciting.
I see Scott up here. I don't know if you got.
Do we have one more panel? One more wrap-up comment?
No, I mean, yeah. So it's sort of a cop-out, but going back to the same point, it's less about new channels, and it's more like how do you use the channels in this new way, given the limitations of what the world is like today, right? So I talked about Facebook and like the channel tactics, but like it applies to kind of all of them, right? How the channels interact with each other has also fundamentally changed. So like figuring out what is the value of like an SEM touch early in the journey or later in the journey? Is it actually the same now, given that in the past maybe Facebook has reached a customer earlier in the journey and now maybe not? And so figuring out how the interplay of channels works is kind of our focus.
Thank you so much to our panel this afternoon, covering a really important topic. And again, there's more here where we're going to be expanding, and we look forward to seeing you back this afternoon. So thank you again.